Joined us yet, but I'm Sandy Schoelles with Jennifer Hynes and Nicholas Humphrey and Antonio Reid, and this is the State of the Planet report that we love to do. And what we're going to do tonight is we just decided to come on, pop in, say hi, and then we are going to play the opening video, which gives the chat room time to fill up and gives us time to share it on Facebook and do all the little housekeeping things. So, okay, so everybody enjoy the video, and we are gone. Hang on, that's not the one I wanted. I am sorry. Jennifer, can you just do me a favor and say hi to everybody while I find the right darn thing? I had it all set up and it's like gone. Now I have to. Okay. And I don't know what's going to happen if I take it off. So people are joining us.
No problem. Well, welcome everybody. We're happy to welcome you to State of the Planet. We've got a great show lined up for you today. We're obviously going to be talking about Hurricane Laura, which just crashed on through. We're also going to be talking about sea level rise, and we're going to be talking about the fires in California, and also an article from phys.org, species that are pushed out of the tropics by climate change. And that's basically it. It's going to be all climate change all the time.
Okay, and I'm going to work on getting this video up. Thank you, Jen. Sorry about that, guys, but I had everything set, and then, of course, things don't happen the way I always want them to. Enjoy the video.
Guys, some of the flooding models we're about to show you of this rising threat may sound like they come from alarmist voices of doom, but in fact, they come from conservative scientists, state planners, and yes, even policymakers. So we found that buildings are still going up, still being built in these future flood zones.
All this will be up underwater.
According to new scientific models, this area could see water several inches deep across several of its neighborhoods, with oncoming sea level rise expected in just a few decades. Scientists say the rate of sea level rise is growing exponentially, all because of recent increases in ice melt and warming of the oceans.
Sono le macchine sotto acqua, ragazzi. Questa è via Sant'Alessio. Guardate questo signore, sono qui che lo sto guardando in diretta, poveretto. Acque grandine, ragazzi, non ho mai visto una cosa del genere.
Vecchio.
Tutto iniziato da un semplice cestino.
Che va giù a Porta Vescovo, Santa Toscana. Questa è la radice di un albero che ho in faccia. Un disastro, ragazzi. Ma nel resto di Verona io abito lassù. Macchina della suocera distrutta. Voleva cambiarla, ma forse non oggi.
Fire watch for you. A fifth person has died in the LNU lightning complex wildfires. Those fires have burned more than 350,000 acres across 5 counties since starting a week ago. More than 900 buildings have been destroyed. Even bigger than that is the SCU lightning complex, which is the largest wildfire in California right now.
Placerville, Yuba City, Marysville, so some portions of the valley and some lower foothills. Also along near Patterson, it's looking pretty bad as well. But look at Sacramento, Elk Grove, Stockton, Modesto starting to move into the yellow, which means that it's moderate air quality and you can go outside and do things without any major issues as of right now.
They're taking a toll on cattle operations that are losing their pastures and in some cases losing animals. They say some ranchers in our area are losing their food for livestock for the rest of the summer. And it all comes at an extremely tough time following the trade disputes and the pandemic. They say the unhealthy air quality is even affecting wine country, which generates millions of dollars to the local economy.
I'm here, and as you can see behind me, this is what's left of a tractor that it appears. As you can see, the fire just absolutely torched it. Out in the distance here, this is, we believe, a home or some kind of structure, but as you can see, there's nothing left of it, nothing but just ashes and charred up parts. You can't even make out what some of this stuff is. This particular structure has been completely just torn apart by this fire, and you really have to feel for these homeowners when they do come back on their properties and see that their homes have been torn apart, but somehow they got to come back here in peace, back everything together. Kirsten?
Some damage. The homes on stilts faring better, obviously, than the trailers. You can see a trailer just over here to the left. It's off of its frame. It's been battered. Doesn't look too bad, right? We'll take a look at the storage unit that's off to the left even further than that. It's up on its side. And there are trailers that are just wiped out. You can see the axles and nothing else left. This storage building here, wiped out. On its side, his mother-in-law's house, and he said while it might look okay, there's water damage inside the house. He thinks that that's probably going to be the case with all of the homes out here. The power lines are down. When they talk about catastrophic damage, well, this is what they're talking about. It does not appear to us that anyone chose to ride out the storm here, and you can see why. After all, one more thing to show you, the Gulf of Mexico is just right over there. That's how close they are to the Gulf of Mexico. There's no place to run, no place to hide.
There's no place to run and there's no place to hide. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House. So, welcome, Jennifer, Antonio, Nicholas.
Well, it's good to be here, but what a bunch of disasters all around.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a month so far.
Hell of a month.
A year, a month, a year.
A year, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, who would like to get started with all of the good news? And how would you like to start while I navigate the mechanics behind the scenes?
Well, I can talk about Hurricane Laura.
Why not? That's going on. Yeah, go for it. I have an idea. You talk about hurricane, Jen talks about fires, and Tony talks about sea level rise.
Sounds good.
See how rehearsed we are, guys?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Hurricane Laura, that was powerful Category 4 hurricane that made landfall very, very early this morning. Winds of 150 miles per hour sustained. Lake Charles, Louisiana had gusts over 135 before the weather station was damaged. and inoperable. The radar station there, the radar site there was destroyed by the hurricane force winds. So it was a truly horrific storm in terms of both winds and storm surge. It was, I'm hearing from some of the people that, keep the statistics and the climatology, that it was tied as the most powerful hurricane to ever strike Louisiana, tying a storm from 1856. So it's been quite a while since there's been a storm this strong, and it was definitely the strongest that Southwest Louisiana had ever faced. So you talk about hurricanes like this and climate change. You can think about how they form and how they strengthen, and of course the impacts that result from them. And with climate change, it's becoming pretty well established that that storms are getting stronger. There's more Category 4 and 5 storms now than in the past, and there will be as climate change progresses. There are differences in the basins between if there'll be a lot more tropical systems or even less tropical systems. For example, in the Atlantic, there's an expectation there may become less storms, but the storms that do form will have a tendency to become more intense and more and intensify faster. And we've been seeing these very rapidly intensifying storms, especially over the past few years, with storms such as Harvey, Irma, Michael, and now Laura. And there's also the impacts that those storms produce. You're getting storms that have higher rainfall rates. And Sandy, I don't know if you were able to bring up that graphic I had.
The NOAA graphic? Is that, or the Harvey graphic? The Harvey graphic. Okay, it is up, and we are covered.
Yeah. So basically, they Climate Central, a nonprofit organization that deals with climate change science and research, they had found that Hurricane Harvey, and by the way, this is the anniversary, or last night is the anniversary of the landfall of Hurricane Harvey 3 years ago. So Laura made landfall around the same time 3 years now. Harvey did 3 years ago, and produced that titanic rainfall event that caused all that devastating flooding in the greater Houston metro area. And it was found that it was the event was 3 times more likely to occur because of climate change that's already occurred. So climate change has already changed the climate so that events like Harvey are more likely to occur in our current world. And obviously, as climate change progresses, those kind of events are going to become more frequent and more intense than what Harvey produced, which is just amazing to think about. So the higher rainfall rates, because of a warmer atmosphere that can hold more moisture, and also because of the general circulation pattern in the tropics and the subtropics is slowing down, tropical cyclones are moving more slowly than they did in the past, which means that as a result, oh, there's my son coming in trying to break up my interview.
Does he want to be a star?
Yeah, he wants to be a star. I know.
Oh my God.
Daddy's doing a talk.
Daddy's an educator.
I wanted to possibly add Hurricane Michael. It was a similar event in 2018 where it was originally forecast to come in as maybe a Cat 1, Cat 2, and it scaled all the way to, was it a Cat 5? I mean, it was.
Yeah, it was a Cat 5.
And it was the most powerful storm to hit the panhandle of Florida. And that was just 2018.
Yeah, and one of the things you can note from that is that there was there was heat wave going on like a all summer and into the fall, across the southeast, and that included the Gulf of Mexico, the northern Gulf of Mexico. So the Gulf was very, very abnormally warm, and you had this storm that went over that warm water, and the atmospheric environment was favorable for it to maintain itself. So it strengthened rapidly all the way up to landfall, and so Michael was more of a Michael and Laura were more high wind events, although Laura had the storm surge, but luckily it went into unpopulated or low populated areas compared to, say, Katrina that caused a devastating surge in Louisiana and Mississippi. And of course, one of the things you're going to talk about here in a few minutes, Antonio, is sea level rise. Sea level rise is another impact that will enhance hurricane storm surges without even the hurricanes necessarily getting stronger, because the dry ground will disappear below the ocean as the ocean rises. And so as a result, those 15, 20-foot storm surges are going to go so much farther inland than they ever did, because you're losing all that marshland, and wetlands are becoming submerged permanently underwater, and they act as a buffer to storm surges, and it's particularly in Louisiana, and they're disappearing every single day. More land is going away every day from subsidence and from sea level rise.
Nick, can I ask you about the meteorology of some of these storms? Because, it looks like to me, and I'm watching a lot of this on Bentley Sky, that's one of the websites I use to track a lot of these storms, that the meteorology is increasingly unpredictable. I mean, these storms are taking us by surprise. I was just watching 2 days ago the European model, the USF. Most models were agreeing that this was not going to be a Category 4. And then it just rapidly intensified over the Gulf right before making contact with land, leaving people very little time. If this hurricane did happen to hit Houston, for example, it would have left Houstianos, if that's their name, out of almost no time to prepare. And we've seen this now with Michael. We've seen this with Hurricane Laura. And I'm just wondering, is this just a new part of the climate change phenomena where we're going to see tropical storms or depressions or Category 1s spawn into Category 4 or 5 just a day or two before they make landfall?
I'd say it's a yes and a no. Like, intensity forecasting has always been challenging enough for forecasters, because everything that goes to the intensity of the hurricane is literally within like 10 or 15 mile inner core of the storm. So it's very hard to predict, because models most models can't figure out what's going on such a fine scale. The track forecast for Laura, for example, is actually quite good. I think out to 2.5 or 3 days, they predicted pretty much where it was going to make landfall, like the center line, where it was going to make landfall. Now a few miles here or there makes a very tight difference, and obviously Lake Charles avoided the worst of the storm surge because of that. It hit. The eye moved directly over Lake Charles in the strong onshore flows to the east of the eye, so they didn't get all the horrific storm surge. It went into less populated areas, luckily.
But as for the intensification,
the intensification, it's always been difficult to predict as is, but now if you're bringing in something like climate change, where you have more hotter ocean, hotter water, I mean, I think most meteorologists had an idea that the forecast was going to, just based on the environment, the forecast was intensities were going to get overshot by what was going to actually happen in nature. But the models didn't really have a way to tell it explicitly that was going to happen. So because of that, they couldn't predict a Category 4 storm making landfall 2 or 3 days out. It had to be closer in when the model started to hone in and to go, okay, it's going to be a very intense storm. And and it ended up being that intense. But yeah, I mean, the in terms of intensity, the lead time is for some of these storms can be quite short. So that's why most meteorologists would be like, plan for a category higher so that you're at least prepared for something surprising happening. But yeah, I mean, the storms of the future, or storms of now, even, are going to continue to, bring us these intense surprises, and we have to kind of mentally plan ahead that we can be surprised, which is hard. But
I have a quick thing here, and I wondered, and Jennifer, this pertains to you and me with this hurricane. Somebody made a comment in the chat, and they had said the media is being very muted on this. I hear a bit of an echo. I don't know what it is, but the media is being a bit of a, muted. Did you notice any difference in the coverage of this, of Laura?
Well, yeah, I thought that they said initially it was going to be like a 20-foot storm surge, which is like you will die if you're in a 20-foot storm surge.
Yeah,
and I think it turned out being like 10 or 11 feet storm surge instead. So, I mean, I was watching the Weather Channel all yesterday, just watching this thing come in. There's something about watching these hurricanes spinning and moving towards shore, and you're like, oh my God, and it was going to hit around midnight. And I was like, holy crap, if this thing is going to do what they say it's going to do. So on the Weather Channel, they weren't being muted at all. They were just basically saying, if you're on the shore, get out. There is a possibility of a 20-foot storm surge, which is non-survivable.
Yeah, the 20-foot storm surge, it probably did in fact happen. It just happened out in the middle of rural.
Did we lose livestock? Is there a report on livestock? Because I was freaking out on Twitter about
the storm's still going on, right?
Holy crap.
Yeah, it's still going on. It's weakening, but yeah, it's still going on.
I wish I could pull live video.
I mean, they're not getting, as far as I'm aware, there not going to be any type of major reportings on this storm as far as the local damage until winds die down below 35 miles an hour. I mean, we're talking, like Nick said, just because it doesn't hit a populated area, it doesn't mean extensive system and ecosystem damage isn't going on. And I think that certainly is the case there.
That's what I'm worried about. I really am. It's just so, it's an ecosystem, but there was also livestock, and that's what I was worried about because, they could certainly get the livestock into the trucks to get them to the slaughterhouse. Why couldn't they move them out of the way of the goddamn hurricane? And I hope they did. That's my contribution. Okay, carry on. Now, Jen, are you going to talk about fires? Who wants to bring up or are we finished with hurricane? I'm just trying to be the timekeeper lady here.
Yes. Yeah, I'm done. I'm done. Anyway.
Yeah.
Should I flip
the
a
West
coin?
is burning up, guys. The West is burning up, and especially California, but not just California. All these Western states are way, way too dry and very, very combustible and add heat and wind, and, the whole place goes up like tinder. So there's an article that came out in the Los Angeles Times today, August 27th, and it's about California. California is continuing to burn, and it's a very, very, very scary thing.
You want me to pull it up? Which article is it? I have
the LA Times one.
All right, let's see if I can get this up there.
One of the guys put into our chat.
All right, let's see. Is it? Oh no, it's paywalling me out, I think.
That's all right.
Nope. Here it is. Can you see it? There it is. California's. This one, Jen, California's fleeing wildfires are talking about climate change like never before.
Right. And again, just like Nick was just saying, how quickly things develop, how quickly things intensify. The same thing is happening with the wildfires. And they say what's striking about these fires is how quickly we went from nothing to our largest fire crisis in history. Think about it. That's insane. Just in the span of a couple of days, you can go to everything's fine, business as usual, everyone's going around, and then boom, the whole thing goes up. So far, 1.4 million acres have burned. That's what they say here.
Yeah.
And they say they've never seen anything like this. This is the combination of all the fires together. And the other scary thing about these California fires is they do not have the resources to fight it. So, that's pretty scary. So they're going to wait for cooler weather to help things get under control. Well, it's August, the weather's going to start cooling down now. They say they have 14,000 firefighters out right now. And I live in Colorado. I have not been able to see the mountains for like a couple of weeks, it seems, ever since all this craziness started. And, when I go out into my patio, the chairs are all covered with like ash and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's, because Colorado's on fire as well. So it's a pretty scary thing that, these fires are happening and they're getting bigger and bigger each year. And in California, people live, in gullies because it's so pretty. There's a lot of hills and gullies and mountains. And if you're in a gully, like with eucalyptus trees, which are just like highly combustible, the whole thing can just explode into, a tinderbox and a huge blaze. And the trick is to get out. I think only 7 people have died this fire season, they say, in California. But that's still 7 people,
I know.
And what a way, it's horrible.
Yeah, pretty horrible.
And,
well, Jennifer, really what about the fire tornadoes that are being reported?
Oh, yeah. Those fire tornadoes are crazy.
Yeah.
They're absolutely insane. They have like a life of their own. And there's nothing scarier, they're just like this crazy. They're like one of those cartoon characters. Wasn't there a cartoon character that did a little spinning thing or something like that?
Yeah, you're talking about.
It makes me think of Dante's Inferno. I mean, it really is horrific to see some of these scenes where fire tornadoes are as dangerous as they sound. I mean, they can literally pull you in. I mean, you get pulled into a super heat engine, a fire. I just can't even imagine. And this is the world that we're in. I mean, how many states did you say were having fires right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's severe.
Yeah.
And I think what's one of the most disgusting thing was Trump was going to withhold funding because California had to clean up their forests. They hadn't been sweeping their forests and keeping their forests clean.
Oh, they didn't have the forest Roombas going?
Yeah.
God's sake.
God.
I mean, there's some element. Well, I wouldn't defund them. That'd be the wrong thing to do. But there's some truth to the fact that, the way that humans, our culture is so dead in terms of understanding this living planet. And we have to understand that these areas were fire prone before. They did have fires, but the fires were always under control because they were a natural element in the ecosystem.
Right.
Today, through climate change and human interaction,
lots of humans.
Yeah.
Lots of human interaction and industrial human interaction. We've really changed the relationship nature has with itself, and then of course with us. And so now we're in a situation that's untenable. We can't allow, we would have to do a lot of controlled burns. We would have to be acting as the force of nature doing controlled burns. And we do that to some extent. But, look at the situation we're in. I feel like year after year, we're having historic wildfires in California.
I think two of the fires in California, or is it Colorado? Goodness, I'm getting my states mixed up because they're so big, are like the 2 largest in this state history, and you just had a couple of historic fires a couple years ago, and like the Mendocino complex and the Carr fire, and it's just so many that are so huge now. because of just a repeat of drought and then wetness. Everything grows, overgrowth, then ridiculous drought again. It's just a wild swing every year or every other year for the Four Corner states, for California. I mean, it's just crazy. You know, Colorado is dry, parts of Kansas and even Nebraska are abnormally dry. I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster every single year.
There is a comment by TCR Galaxy, and I think it's pertinent to what we're talking about. I remember Antonio saying last year that if the Siberian wildfires were as bad in 220, it was basically game over. Wow. So are
well,
they
that's
as
another
bad?
thing. I mean, it's not just the western United States. The peat fires up in Siberia are just as bad as they've ever been. It looks like an inferno, hell on earth. And of course, the peat fires don't go out very easily, and they just keep burning and smoldering, you know?
Yeah.
And there's the Australian fires that started the year 2020, claiming the lives of 2 billion animals. So we got to remember, I mean, the world is on fire in some respects.
Yeah.
And the emission from
I should pull
fires
up
are
Null
immense.
School. Somebody made a comment about the Earth Null School showing the fires like everywhere. I should have thought to pull that up. Oh, maybe I could. It's not anything. I mean, it's pathetic. My commentary, you know.
Yeah, don't forget about the Amazon last year. And
Oh my God, yeah.
But
Every
those fires
single
at least
ecosystem.
Yeah.
So at least there's the control there. The Amazonian fires were fires that we set, which actually kind of dumbs down on the madness that we would
even start fires in the Amazon. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yep. Well, that's. I know that it's a doomerist view, but as I look at everything around me, I got this feeling today, just really like it is so overwhelming. And Antonio and I had chatted about it, and I'm just glad we have each other to talk about and to figure all of these things out. And that's all you in the chat too. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's scary, especially in these times of COVID when we have to kind of isolate, and most of us are staying home a lot more than we used to, and not talking to as many people as we used to. And it's very isolating, and it's very scary. And these fires and hurricanes and all these natural occurrences can drive you into a state of terror and hopelessness and depression. You know, it's not fun.
This world was, you know, nature was hostile enough when the climate was stable. I mean, you had wildfires that sometimes went crazy, and you had extreme hurricanes, you know, on occasion. And I mean, you had like crazy stuff happening in the world 200 years ago.
Everything is just so sped up.
Like now everything's sped up, and everything's bigger and more, you know, bigger is more, and everything's sped up and compressed. So now we face all these threats from all different directions. You got a pandemic, got violent hurricane, you got ridiculous fires everywhere, and you know, if you're sitting, you know, in a relatively calm place at the moment, things are good. But then you might get hit by a derecho that flattens your cropland, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like happened a couple of weeks ago.
What's going to happen
at your place?
Yeah.
But it is. You know, there's a lot of unsurety now. You know, there used to be kind of more of a feeling like the earth was stable, life was stable, you know, you could go about your business and have a normal life. And now that's really not the case. And people are talking about it more. You know, people apparently with these California wildfires, you know, it used to be sort of verboten to, you know, well, let's not talk about climate change now. That's not going to help. But now people are talking about it while these things are happening, you know.
Yeah, the climate.
Talk about the truth.
Yeah, the climate the climate didn't stop changing because people refused to talk about it or thought it wasn't the time to talk about it. I remember even 3 years ago with Harvey, some people got really upset about talking about climate change with like this ridiculously extreme event going on, historic event. You can't even consider the possibility that climate change was involved in something like that. And then the scientists that decided to do the research came out and stated, hey, this is like ridiculously more likely, like 300 percent more likely because of climate change. So it's like, you can't.
But the deniers are still there.
Yeah.
God. That segues me.
The trolls.
Yeah, and I'm going to segue with that because actually I'm going to segue into Antonio's talk because I watched the whole video, and then what I did, I'm going to pull it up and show you guys something out there about, I don't know if I have it pulled up. Oh, I probably don't. Anyway.
Oh, please do.
What? Pull up the what? Pull up what? I'm going to pull up okay, I'm going to pull, well, I couldn't find the video comments, the live comments, but I do have a picture, and I'm going to show it. I have a screenshot. Okay, and I want, oh, that's not the one. I had wanted to, here we go. I'm going to put this in the middle. So Antonio played a video for me, and then I used some of it for the, for what I created, for the opening video, right? And it was a news show, and I have the article. But after the video, the comments were insane. It was insane because people were talking about the sea level rise in San Francisco and that area, and people are writing Stop Agenda 21 and this incessant development all over the Bay Area. Vote Red 2020 and save what's left of Northern California. And people are saying, see the tide gauge. The salient data says the computer models are profoundly wrong. This video is a junk science. I mean, almost every single comment was crazy. I mean, crazy. And
Jennifer, excuse me, I'm sorry, Sandy, I think in part that is what we should see, because I was when I saw this video, and that's why I sent it to you. Like, I would not send a local, news report from San Francisco to you.
Yeah.
But I was devastated because this was the first time that I seen in the mainstream local news anything I was talking about in 2018, that we were now locked in, not just for severe sea level rise, but our civilization level ending sea level rise within just 1 to 2 decades from now. And here's this report. Now, it didn't contextualize the level of sea rise that way, but they were using the same numbers. And I've said multiple times, and I'll continue to say, and Jennifer's up there in Colorado, close to Colorado Boulder University, where Jim White is professor of alpine and Arctic research. And I asked him the question, what would 2 feet of sea level rise do to our human society? And overwhelmingly, 2 feet would absolutely throw us into a global catastrophe. Why? Because as the sea rises, we face saltwater intrusion into our cultural systems, devastating our ability to grow food. As Nick was talking about earlier, storm surge takes on an entirely new character for every inch that the sea rises. And we're not talking about inches. We're talking about feet upon feet upon feet upon feet. For the rest of the time I think humanity will be on the planet. Starting in this article, this forecast was showing 12 additional, 6 inches from today, but 12 more inches from the 2000 level by 2030. So we're going to get an additional half foot of sea level rise in just the next 10 years. And most people don't understand how devastating that is. Think about it this way. For every 1 foot the sea goes up vertically, at sea level, it goes 100 feet in. So we are talking about, in just by 2040, 2045, catastrophic levels of sea rise hitting every single coastal city around the world at the same time. We're talking about Shanghai, we're talking about London, we're talking about New York, we're talking about Los Angeles, San Francisco, Miami. This is absolutely on a scale, and they're talking about, they were showing live maps. These cities, parts of them are going to be submerged. You know, maybe it's just going to be at first an inch or two daily underwater permanently. And that's, of course, just going to build up quite rapidly. And as the decades go on, and by the way, what they also said in this report, which hit the nail in my head, like, oh my God, I conceptualized this intellectually, but now I'm really now having to come to terms with this. But what they said in the report is these levels of catastrophic sea level rise are locked in. There's nothing the people of 2020 or beyond can do to stop these catastrophic levels of sea rise. There is no emission cutting we could do. There is no geoengineering.
No.
We are locked in now in the next decade or two for catastrophic levels of sea rise.
Yeah.
Because of all the melting.
The admission that we've been doing all this time. And that's what people have to understand is if you're a drunk and you've been drinking heavily every single day for the last, let's say, 55 years, and now you're dying of stage 4 liver, whatever, you know, stop drinking today cold turkey is not going to prevent catastrophic liver failure. Okay. And that is essentially the report these meteorologists were giving, and they did not contextualize it like that, but they were sharing the same numbers that I was saying, these are the catastrophic numbers, and here they are, openly sharing them and not contextualizing them really fast. And then they had the graphic disappear really quickly. So Sandy, I want to bring this up. Can you show the NOAA graphic for us? This is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States, people. Again, these are the prompt sources for everybody to see.
It's up.
Okay. So this graph here shows the expected levels of sea rise over the course of this century. And as you can see, the red line is actually our current trajectory. So let me be clear. So the red line that you see is not a projection. It is a projection of the current trends, okay? The purple line, or the violent line that you see, is the extreme. So this is showing if we were to have a maximum level of sea rise occur, okay? And so what's happening here is by 2040, we are just under 2 feet of sea level rise. We are, by 2040, just under the catastrophic level of sea rise for around the globe. And this one is particularly San Francisco, but you can kind of extrapolate that out. Not all places will face the same level of sea rise. The eastern United States, for example, New York area, Boston, will actually face a couple more inches of sea rise than, let's say, San Francisco or the Gulf. So it is going to be devastating. This is going to start increasingly happening. And they're talking about, you know, the conversation is contextualized economically. We're obviously talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure that will have to be abandoned.
And you know,
they're still building. They're still building in these places that are now clearly in flood zones.
My question
and like
here,
you said,
oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, and like you said, it has compounding impacts. So it's impacts on infrastructure, impacts on agriculture, and impacts on making storms more devastating by the ability to move water farther inland, because the water line is moved farther up and inland too.
I'm here in North Carolina, and I've never been I mean, we are 20 years away from when I'm going to have to probably evacuate my state because, or something's going to happen to our nuclear facility. We have a nuclear facility that is 10 to 20 miles right off the coast. I mean, we are at coast. I mean, we were the storm, Laura. The 20-foot storm surge was going to go 30 miles inland. So we're talking about a situation. I don't even know what to say. Like this is untenable now. This is literally untenable now.
No,
we don't have
Antonio,
enough time.
Do you think that's why the comment section and the people that commented on that news report are so paranoid, angry, and in denial because this is the news finally talking about this truth that they can't handle?
Sandy, I'm in denial.
And also that news report and and that news report, they were admitting the exponentiation. They say sea level rise is getting faster, and it's not just going to get faster up until 2040. It's going to be faster and faster until, thousands of years. I mean, it started, a new cycle started. The glaciers are softening. They're speeding up. They're pouring into the ocean. Greenland sea, the ice on Greenland is just melting. That's just a huge amount of new water going from this frozen ice, and the people, it just bring out the trolls.
People don't understand.
They're not trolls.
I think the maximum level of sea rise from today, look, if all the ice on Earth was melt, is 200 meters. So we're, if not 250 meters. So people don't understand. We're talking about really thin margins here. It is nothing for our planet to traverse and dump multiple meters of sea rise on us in a century's time. And Hansen was warning about this.
Yeah.
He told us that we would not just be facing millimeters or a few inches or a few feet, but multiple meter sea rise within a century. And we're here now. We're on schedule by the end of the century to face somewhere between, at bare minimum, 6, which I don't think we're going to face 6 feet of sea level rise. We're going to get closer to 9, if not 10 feet of sea level rise by the end of the century. And that's way more than is already. The catastrophe level is 2 feet. So 10 is already so far beyond.
And it's and for humans, it's this kind of a slow motion disaster. It's gradual but accelerating and piling up more and more and more as time progresses. And so people have trouble conceptualizing what that looks like. They look at one disaster like a hurricane or like a fire. They don't see the accumulation of damage over time accelerating faster until it's literally collapsed the system. In this case, collapsing civilization, collapsing the civilization via collapsing the economy, collapsing cultures, collapsing the ability to function, and life as we know it, So that's the point that people will then see what's happening, but by then it's way too late to even understand it and to hit you in the face.
Yeah. And it's good to remember, too, that we are interglacial. We are still in a little bit of an ice age. There's not much left. Over 2/3 of it is already melted. We have already, there's no we, but the Earth has already experienced around 400 feet of sea level rise in the last several thousand years. I think it began 14,000 years ago, and until about 8,000 years ago, or I think by 6,000 years ago it had kind of tapered off, and this kind of stable time frame is basically our civilization. But the Earth has already experienced 400 feet of sea level rise. We have another 230 feet left to go if all the ice melts on Earth.
Oh my God.
So that's how much is baked into this cake, is about 230 feet of sea level rise if all the ice on Antarctica melts and if all the ice on Greenland melts and everywhere else. That's
so I was wrong then. As 200 feet, not 200 meters of sea level rise left. I mean,
yeah,
either way,
it's bad either way. But yeah, no, I mean, there's about 230 feet left, and it's going to happen because there is. I mean, the last time it was this hot, the seas were many meters higher than they are today. We just haven't caught up yet.
At 200 feet more sea level rise vertically, that's 2,000 feet inland that we're talking about. It's kind of just, or is that 20,000 feet inland? 100 times 200. So it's really devastating to think about. I mean, and like Nick was saying earlier, when the ocean rises, it doesn't just settle over the land. It erodes that land away. I mean, the land and the water dynamically interact. And so it's, this idea, people really just can't think about all the ways that sea level rise will impact them, because it won't just impact them in that simplistic way, right? You've heard people say, if the sea rises 5 feet, I'll step 6 feet back.
Right. They don't know.
In San Francisco, they were the comments also, somebody had made a comment on that video that said, oh, and I remember this because I actually grew up in the Bay Area as a little kid, up until like 7th grade. And they did put all this fill in the San Francisco Bay Area and build communities there. So there's a lot of landfill down there. And what this person was saying is, well, this is just the landfill deteriorating a lot of it. And that's part of the problem besides the rise, is that this stuff is deteriorating after 50 years. 40 and 50 years.
Well, look at Facebook's new extension. It's like sticking out in the bay, and they said with the sea level rise, that new Facebook extension is basically going to be an island.
That I did.
Pretty dumb
somebody
place.
would mention, because that's kind of just like the ground settling. That was like the same effect as the ground settling. Okay, so if I was to find, humans are so silly. If I was to find that the sea level was rising and that the ground was settling in, like going down, that would, to me, I would just add that up and say, oh wow, the situation's even worse than it. That wouldn't be a counter, right? That doesn't cancel it out. It actually adds it up. So it's weird how people are just like but that's what we have to do, because we are genuinely facing a threat that's unfathomable. All of our coastal cities on every single continent now face existential threat within the next 20 years. We cannot fathom what that means now for our human society. It's simply just going to collapse. We're not going to have it will cause a schism within our countries and among our countries. To have massive diversions of our populations just move inland and abandon these megacities. Think about the population of Shanghai. That's just one major city in China. It's going to be faced in the next 20 years with just, and a lot of these cities, they will pour hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure. So we definitely will see inequity in how some of these cities survive.
Like Miami.
I think that's totally, you just can't in Miami.
Florida
Seawalls don't work. If at sea level all the way through.
New Orleans, my goodness, New Orleans.
No, the main with back to Florida, the main reason seawalls won't ever work in Florida is it's porous. It's on this limestone that has holes all through it, just like Swiss cheese. So you can't keep the water out of that. So. There's no way. And they're still building on the coast.
That's what they're
in
saying
Florida
in San Francisco.
as well.
They said these are obvious flood zones. We know now. Every single one of our city planning guidance models show us these are flood zones. They'll be underwater. They'll suffer catastrophic economic losses, and they're still building high rises. So this is keep the party going until the lights go out. And this is the same model, and this is happening. All of these industrialized cities, all these industrialized countries are well aware that their cities face imminent threat now. And there is no way to manage that panic because think about this. I mean, you guys are all adults. You know what it means to have equity in your home. And for a lot of people, that's where most of their equity is. And so you're telling people to give up their homes and go somewhere else because their entire, not just a little bit somewhere else, really a lot somewhere else. You know, we're talking about how much of Florida as a state is on its coastline.
Yeah.
You know, this is huge impacts that we're talking about here.
Yeah. And the infrastructure, I mean, back to the California news article, I mean, SFO, San Francisco International Airport. When you come in, I don't know how many of you have ever flown into SFO. You come in along the bay and you think you're going to land into the bay and then boom, it's right there. So that thing is just at sea level, and they're going to be putting a seawall around the airport. But, you know, still, I mean, think of out on Cape Canaveral where they have that thing with NASA, right? That's all going to go under. That's right at sea level. So there's so much infrastructure.
I grew up in Seattle, and Seattle's industrial district is near sea level. You look at a map, you see a little islands in the delta of the Duwamish River. It's called a Harbor Island. That island is near sea level. It'll go underwater without much sea level rise at all. And I mean, that's where a lot of the big cranes are, and the port of Seattle. And yeah, I mean, I mean, you're looking at a lot of ports that are going to go underwater really easily.
That's what I'm saying. No one, because that's not how this system works. This system doesn't work when hundreds of millions of people are on the move. This is if a few million people are on the move and they're scattered, you know, proportionally across. This does not work when we're talking about the collapse of nations. And that's what we'll see. And the thing is, it's not just collapse of these cities, but you'll see there'll be a domino effect because these people will go into other cities and the services will fail. And that will be the kind of compounding effect. And you'll see nationalization rise. You'll see localization rise. So it's locked in. I mean, that's what I've been kind of arguing as a political scientist, is that the fall of this particular civilization is now in fact locked in. There's nothing that we can do. We could do a lot of different things, and I hope that we do. But it is for us now locked in.
Yeah,
you saw a preview of that. You saw a preview of that back during Hurricane Katrina, where New Orleans depopulated. You know, people spread out to Houston, spread out to other areas, and I can bet that there's probably people that dealt with Katrina that had to deal with Harvey. You know.
Oh, yeah.
So you escape, you move because of one horrible disaster, and then you face another. You know. So I mean, it starts off small, and I'm not saying that those disasters were small, but the scale of the global scale starts off small, but then it compounds itself, and you have suddenly going from thousands to millions to hundreds of millions of people having to move because of flooding from sea level rise, extreme heat in the summer. They can't. It's so hot outside, you can't work. You got to go somewhere else where the climate's more livable to work outside. You know, you got to do this, you got to do that, and then you're hit by other disasters that those local climates will have to face. So it compounds itself, and that's how civilization collapses in a climate change regime where things are happening so rapidly the society can't cope with it.
Well, people are going to need tools. They're going to need to be able to process this and come together and deal with this. And, this is the time that you need to come together more. And it seems that the more these things happen, the more people split apart, and get very polarized. And because of the fear, act out and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, look in the United States, we are totally, Cindy, if there's another question, that's fine. But in the United States, we're totally wilding out right now. I mean, people don't realize, but the police brutality in that argument is this hyper-militarization that's happening underliningly. A deep surveillance state is being developed because the military, of course, is quite aware that this is about to wow down our population. Look at what just happened in Iowa, for example, where the #1 state in producing eggs, soil, and corn just took absolutely devastating blows from this inland hurricane. And so these effects are going to dynamically impact supply chains, not only here at home, but across the world. And so we're seeing direct devastating impacts from storms, and also indirect and peripheral impacts from storms as well, and from extreme events. And you're right, all of this is compounding everywhere at the same time. And so right now, look at it. We're facing historic wildfires, historic hurricanes, historic pandemic. And all of this is compounding in how our country's responding. And by 2030, it will be, as much as we're hearing about hurricanes, we'll be hearing about sea level rise. so this will be all over us.
Yeah, and by 2030, it will be absolutely impossible to ignore sea level rise. It'll be everywhere. You'll see it everywhere because you'll see structures having to be abandoned, people moving. It will be, I think, there's a prediction right there. I think it'll be part of daily news to discuss something like the creep of sea level rise, because it's not so much a creep anymore by that point. So.
Yeah. Oh my! It seems like my internet's making us lose people's faces. Okay. Let's see questions. We can still hear everybody, and you guys will pop back in. That's usually what happens. And we're going on it. We're a little bit out of about an hour. Actually, I think we've. Let's see. Well, okay. Val said this. He goes, "You guys are not figuring all the civil disturbance going on right now, the riots, protests, etc." But I think that Antonio, didn't you just you did address that?
Yeah, I just.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right.
I'm ever aware of my impending doom.
Yeah, and we lost your beautiful face. I don't know what happened. I don't know, but well, listen.
Yeah, I'm looking at a comment on Facebook by Meryl Lipton. It says, "I think they are also in denial of some sort of self-preservation mode." I would agree
back
with
in
that.
when I was making those.
A lot of it is just psychological self-preservation because it's too much to handle. I mean, you see that with the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, we're on our way to losing like 200,000 Americans by Labor Day weekend, or by the week of Labor Day, and people are, and a lot of people, especially more conservatives, are acting like that's not a big deal. It's not that bad. It's an acceptable level of death. Like, okay.
But but you have to understand the human psychology. I mean, we are telling people that there's an asteroid impact. That's essentially what we're telling people. And it's here, and it's kind of a silent asteroid impact, in a lot of ways. And so, when I wasn't just joking, but in part, I'm still in disbelief myself that I'm actually mean, as a historian, it's it's amazing because I've had the ability in our time to look back at the history of other civilizations and see their downfall. And it's absolutely amazing that I'm literally living at the downfall of my own civilization.
It is. Yeah. It is. I often think that as well. It's like so strange. Every generation that comes along, like, oh, yeah, this is the end of the world, the end of the world. They were saying that around the year 1000. They were like, okay, we're 1,000 years after Christ. This is the end of the world. But this actually, it's not really the end of the world, but it's the end of
It's the end of this live stream because I have nobody. I have nobody to. I keep having just Skype pictures. I'm just so frustrated. Yeah, because all I have is Skype, and I don't have Jennifer or Tony.
This is what happens. Things fall apart. Things are shutting down.
Oh man, this is really making me. It's AT&T slowing me down, or it's the storm because we had storms here. But this has been really great. I don't want to end without your beautiful faces. This is hurting me. Wow. Well, we really had a great conversation, and I appreciate all you guys coming. And we had, we have 100 people, over 100 people, and thank you for all coming. I would like everybody, regardless, I could put up a picture, but regardless, I'd like everybody to give a, your closing, oh, Tony just popped back in, your closing arguments for the evening. And then we'll say adieu. Jennifer, you're back, so go ahead first.
Oh, am I back?
Yeah, everybody's back. Look at that.
Well, I don't really know that I have any closing arguments. I mean, this is pretty depressing. It's like, hurricanes and fires and sea level rise and the whole thing. I think it's a profound time to be alive. I think that this is kind of a time of self-reflection and reckoning. I mean, this is a really, really profound thing. Things are happening so fast, and it's all exponential, and that's another thing to keep in mind. If you think this is exciting, just wait till we, have another live stream on this topic next year or in 2 years, and let's see how it is then. It might even get bigger. So, I guess I kind of feel that we're sort of in the golden sunset of our civilization. So this is a great time to appreciate your life, appreciate those around you, and appreciate what we have now.
Yeah, I think the next years are going to be, amazing, sad, depressing, reflective. It's going to be a lot of mixed emotions. As we watch, the Arctic melt away, we watch the fires get bigger, the storms get more numerous. It's going to be a challenge because it's going to personally, hit all of us at some point. I mean, that derecho in Iowa almost hit Lincoln. I almost got to personally experience it. We saw the huge flooding here in Nebraska a couple of years ago. So, I mean, it's, there's all sorts of things coming down the pike that we'll have to deal with.
Yep. Well, I'm going to end this then. And I thank you for all coming. We really do appreciate this. I do think I'm going to end with the video that we started with because it was pretty good. And good night, everyone. And thank you for coming. All right.
Guys, some of the flooding models we're about to show you of this rising threat may sound like they come from alarmist voices of doom. But in fact, they come from conservative scientists, state planners, and yes, even policymakers. So we found that buildings are still going up, still being built in these future flood zones.
All this will be up underwater.
According to new scientific models, this area could see water several inches deep across several of its neighborhoods, with oncoming sea level rise expected in just a few decades. Scientists say the rate of sea level rise is growing exponentially, all because of recent increases in ice melt and warming of the oceans.
Sono le macchine sotto acqua, ragazzi. Questa è via Sant'Alessio. Guardate questo signore, sono qui che lo sto guardando in diretta, poveretto. Acque grandine, ragazzi, non ho mai visto una cosa del genere.
Vecchio.
Avete chiamato qualcuno? Tutto è iniziato da un semplice cecchino.
Che va giù a Porta Vescovo, Santa Toscana. Questa è la radice di un albero che ho in faccia. Un disastro, ragazzi. Ma nel resto di Verona io abito lassù. Macchina della suocera distrutta. Voleva cambiarla, ma forse non oggi.
Fire watch for you. A fifth person has died in the LNU lightning complex wildfires. Those fires have burned more than 350,000 acres across 5 counties since starting a week ago. More than 900 buildings have been destroyed. Even bigger than that is the SCU lightning complex, which is the largest wildfire in California right now.
Placerville, Yuba City, Marysville, so some portions of the valley and some lower foothills. Also along near Patterson, it's looking pretty bad as well. But look at Sacramento, Elk Grove, Stockton, Modesto starting to move into the yellow, which means that it's moderate air quality and you can go outside and do things without any major issues as of right now.
They're taking a toll on cattle operations that are losing their pastures and in some cases losing animals. They say some ranchers in our area are losing their food for livestock for the rest of the summer. And it all comes at an extremely tough time following the trade disputes and the pandemic. They say the unhealthy air quality is even affecting wine country, which generates millions of dollars to the local economy.
I'm here, and as you can see behind me, this is what's left of a tractor that it appears. As you can see, the fire just absolutely torched it. Out in the distance here, this is, we believe, a home or some kind of structure. But as you can see, there's nothing left of it, nothing but just ashes and charred up parts. You can't even make out what some of this stuff is. This particular structure has been completely just torn apart by this fire, and you really have to feel for these homeowners when they do come back on their properties and see that their homes have been torn apart, but somehow they got to come back here in peace, back everything together. Kirsten?
Some damage. The home's on stilts, faring better obviously than the trailers. You can see a trailer just over here to the left. It's off of its frame. It's been battered. Doesn't look too bad, right? We'll take a look at the storage unit that's off to the left even further than that. It's up on its side. And there are trailers that are just wiped out. You can see the axles and nothing else left. This storage building here, wiped out on its side, is his mother-in-law's house, and he said while it might look okay, there's water damage inside the house. He thinks that that's probably going to be the case with all of the homes out here. The power lines are down. When they talk about catastrophic damage, well, this is what they're talking about. It does not appear to us that anyone chose to ride out the storm here, and you can see why. After all, one more thing to show you. The Gulf of Mexico is just right over there. That's how close they are to the Gulf of Mexico. There's no place to run, no place to hide.